Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome again to Syriana Analysis. I'm your host, Kevork Almassian. Thank you very much for tuning in to today's live streaming. I appreciate you all, whether you're watching this stream on YouTube or on Rumble. I have mentioned this previously that I do not endorse and I do not support any of the candidates in the United States, especially Donald Trump and Kamala Harris. And I tried to deliver a message that the foreign policy of the US is basically not engineered by the president himself, but rather many of the state and non-state actors in the US itself who are responsible and have an invested interest in shaping the foreign policy of the US, and especially the policies that are meant to start or stop wars, that are meant to initiate regime change wars, the policies that can lead into coup d'etats, regime change, civil wars, destabilization efforts, psyops, for example. And there are a group of bureaucrats in the US who have an enormous influence over the discourse of the American politics. And they are very influential to the extent that they can propose and block the nomination of certain personalities to senior positions of the Trump administration or Biden administration or Kamala or Bush or whoever was he or she. They are a group of people with enormous power in the US, and they are capable of shaping this type of appointments. And Donald Trump's administration is not going to be any different. I tried to warn this multiple times. I have many friends who are MAGA supporters, and they were upset with me for criticizing Trump before even he became or before he won these elections. He hasn't become yet the president. We will wait for a few weeks and then he will become the president anyways. But they were very hopeful. I understand. It's very attractive, I would say, talking points from Donald Trump, and very interesting team, especially backed by RFK, backed by Tulsi Gabbard, and backed by many, let's say, political and financial and cultural personalities who have and had an active role in shaping the domestic and foreign policies of the US in the past, or the people who want to see a different path in the US, make America healthy again, make America great again. We want for our money to be spent in the US. We don't want to send money to Ukraine. I mean, with some few exceptions, most of the MAGA people have said nothing about the money funneled to Israel. But in any ways, they said that Donald Trump's endorsement by Zionist hardcore lobbyists in the US means nothing, because Trump is just using their influence and using their endorsement to become a president, and then he will show them the middle finger. Once he comes to power, he will show them the middle finger and he will pursue an America first foreign policy. Amazing. I am from Syria. I'm an ethnic Armenian, and it would be amazing to see America first foreign policy, which means when there is differences of interests between Israel and the US in the region, then the US has to pursue its own foreign policy objectives, right? For example, the presence of the US troops in Syria. They are mostly stationed in Syria for the sake of Israel. The animosity between the US and Iran is because of Israel. There is no active animosity between Iran and the US. Iran doesn't pose any security threat against a country that is stationed 11,000 or 12,000 kilometers away, right? The war on Iraq never posed a security threat to the US, but against Israel. And similarly, Syria, Libya, and many other, for example, now the war in Lebanon, in Gaza, those are not in the interests of the US. If you see it from an objective perspective, the interest of the US is to pursue good relationship with everyone in the region, and bear the fruits of this good relationship. Iran, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Syria, and these countries are interested in having normal relationship with the US. But the US is present in the region because its financial system is based on monopoly, and it's based on controlling the trade routes. It's based on controlling the fuel and oil and energy supply lines and suppressing the rivals, especially the economic rivals in the region. Regional powers or international powers, doesn't matter. The United States wants to suppress these powers to stay on the top. Okay. So, but if you pursue logical foreign policy, then you will copy something similar to the Chinese foreign policy or the Chinese diplomacy and have good relationship with everyone and invest in everyone's country in a free market environment and prove yourself to be a strong competitor. And that is why the US cannot compete with China. So they sanction Chinese technologies and they bulldog against third countries not to purchase Chinese technologies and exclusively buy American technologies, right? Whether it is electronic vehicles or smartphones. And that's why one of the reasons the US imposed sanctions on Huawei, it's also data war. Sucking data nowadays is the new fuel, as Whitney Webb says. And sucking data for the US is so important for shaping many things, basically. On a security level, it's very, very crucial and important. Secondly, for trade and financial reasons, sucking your data, knowing everything about you, knowing what you buy and what are your interests and what you bought in the past, what you could be interested in the future. Today, if you go and buy anything with your and pay with your mobile, for example, NFC, the second you turn on your or log into your Facebook or any other social media account, you see that there is an advertisement coming. So they're sucking your data, they're locating your locations, they're listening to your phone calls, they're doing everything basically, right? So this is what the United States is about. In this environment, we were told that there is this savior, Donald Trump, coming to save the US and save the world, because then we are on the verge of the World War III in Ukraine. And they're correct. Kamala Harris and Biden administration are the worst of any American administration that I have seen and experienced since I opened my eyes to politics. They are the worst. The worst in Ukraine, the worst for Europe, the worst for Russia, the worst for China, the worst for the Middle East, and above all, they are not only complicit, but they're partners with Israel in the extermination war against the Palestinians, right? This will stay like a stain forever in the history, that we will say the Biden-Harris administration endorsed, enabled, supported this war of extermination against the Palestinians. Now, Trump is going to come, and people were hopeful that he's not going to bring neocons and Zionists to his administration. And we warned them before he won this election, right? And they said, no, that this time is going to be different. And this last week, in my opinion, call me a conspiracy theorist, I don't care. I think there was a psychological operation initiated by the Trump team to against Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo. So all of a sudden, everybody is talking about Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley and how warmonger they are and how neocons they are, and they have to stay away from the Trump admin, right? And this has become normalized even by people who are arch supporters of Donald Trump on social media platforms. So I would say this was a psychological operation to give the impression to the people that Trump is not going to appoint neocons, and they wanted to find this sacrifice lamp, or two lamps at least in this case. Those are Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, and they sacrificed them in this the discourse of these discussions. And Donald Trump himself, he made a post on his app that he owns. I think this is called the Truth app or something. And he said, I will not be inviting former Ambassador Nikki Haley or former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo to join the Trump administration, which is currently in formation. I very much enjoyed and appreciated working with them previously and would like to thank them for their service to our country, make America great again. So after all this hype and about Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, Donald Trump himself said that he's not going to appoint any of these personalities. But as I mentioned, I believe they were the sacrifice lambs in this discussion in order to give the impression that Donald Trump is not appointing any neocons. However, we have Dave Smith, who is a libertarian. He says the Stop Pompeo movement is great, but it's not enough. Right now, we need maximum pressure to keep all neocons and war hawks out of the Trump administration. They have had their time at the table and brought nothing but disaster to the world and to this country. America first, screw the war machine. And I totally agree with him. This is not only about Nikki Haley and Mike Pompeo, although it's beautifully said and rightfully said that they are neocons and they're war hawks and they shouldn't be around Donald Trump or anywhere close to Donald Trump. I understand that. But it's not about them. The system is so corrupted that it recreates itself. If Pompeo and Nikki Haley are out, there will be someone who acts like Mike Pompeo and Nikki Haley, right? And if any other A or B or C, any warmonger is out, the system itself is corrupted to the core, that it recreates itself, and nobody comes to the bottom of the hierarchy to the higher positions unless he is part of the establishment. He's groomed by the establishment. He has become part and essential part of this establishment. It's impossible for someone to escape the indoctrination and the grooming. Just like you see this PDD's scandal in the US, how he grooms the hip-hop scene. With very few exceptions, you cannot skip it if you are part of this music and cultural scene, right? So this is how the system works in the US. This is what I wanted to explain to the people. And I would be very happy to see that I'm wrong and they're correct and Trump would change course. But what's happening this week with the nominations and with the names that we are seeing, it's impossible to believe that this is not going to be anything but different than any neocon, previous neocon administration. I mean, although the Donald Trump Jr., he endorsed Dave Smith's call, saying that he agrees with him that all the neocons should stay out of power. However, unfortunately speaking, as Dan Cohen, our friend, said in this case, he said, yesterday Donald Trump Jr. announced he would push to keep neocons out of the administration. Since then, his father appointed 3 neocons to top positions. Clearly, Trump is working for the Israel first billionaires that paid him, not the American voters that elected him. Unfortunately, this is the bitter reality. If you support Trump or you don't support Trump, I don't disrespect you, if you support Trump or not. I'm just saying that I want to be on the right side and tell the people the truth that I believe is about. And in this case, for example, you see even Glenn Greenwald jumped the wagon and says, Trump often deviated from the views of his top advisors. And I know Donald Trump Jr. and others are doing what he said below, but Trump's last 3 appointees, like Elise Stefanik, Mike Welts, and Rubio, are war hawks, fully aligned with the worst prongs of bipartisan DC consensus. Now, you would be shocked and surprised that Trump is appointing neocons and Zionists in his administration. I'm not. I'm very happy also to share with you some of the personalities who are going to be part of his administration from the media reports and the AIPAC tracker, which is an amazing site, guys. Go and follow this site and this page on X. It's called AIPAC tracker. So they made this thread showing us the names and the personalities who are going to be part of the Donald Trump administration, and they are all pro-Israel. And they received money from the Israel lobby, right? For example, we have Zionist Republican Elise Stefanik. She's going to become the next UN ambassador, and she received $917,000 from AIPAC money. Guys, this is almost $1 million money from AIPAC. Do you really think that She's going to be anything but a Zionist and a war hawk in the UN. This is one of the most important positions in the US diplomacy. Then we have the Senator Marco Rubio. He's going highly likely to become the Secretary of State of the US. And how much money he received from the Israel lobby? $1 million from the Israel lobby. Marco Rubio received $1 million, and he is highly likely going to become the Secretary of State. So how is he going to be any different from the previous administration? Seriously. Then we have the former Congressman Lee Zeldin. He's going to be leading the Environmental Protection Agency, and he received $916,000 from AIPAC. Then we have Michael Waltz. He selected him to serve as his national security advisor instead of Jake Sullivan. And Bro received $235,000 from AIPAC money. I mean, he's not doing well, apparently. His previous personalities received like $1 million. He's only 223. Seems that he's not really licking the boot much enough in this case. Then we have Rick Scott. He's going to become Senate Majority Leader, $606,000 from AIPAC. Then we have South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem. She is going to become Secretary of Homeland Security. And the governor, she signed a bill into law that conflates criticism of Israel with anti-Semitism. This was in last March. So those are the names, guys. It's really frustrating to see, but I wouldn't expect anything else, to be honest. Now, this one is, I'm not sure about it. This could be just a, let's say, an allegation or a rumor. We don't know. But Donald Trump probably also could choose Lindsey Graham. This guy is a criminal psychopath, man. This guy, he thrives on blood, right? And he could become a Secretary of Defense. I'm not sure about this one, but those are the reports that are being circulated nowadays. So it's my duty to tell you what could happen, right? And in this case, so Trump comes to the White House. He wants to pursue a new foreign policy. So what is going to change in the Middle East? So let's start from Middle East. The most important thing that could change in the Middle East is what's happening between Iran and Israel. That's the most important thing that could change and become more hawkish against Iran. And listen to me, I'm not only saying this. Even the Gulf countries, Saudi Arabia and UAE, who have great relationship with the United States, and especially, particularly with Donald Trump, they love Donald Trump in Saudi Arabia and the UAE, and they wanted for him to win this election, right? But they themselves are worried. Imagine that. Because they don't want war with Iran. And they believe that if there is a war with Iran, Donald Trump will ask them to pick a side. And if it's a pick a side, then they will be on the side of the US. And when they are on the side of the US, they will come under Iranian fire. And they don't want to do that. They say, we want to thrive and we want to pursue our economic vision for the future, and we want to feed our people. We don't want to be part of a conflict with Iran, which is amazing. And China recently, if you remember, intervened between Iran and Saudi Arabia and flipped these equations in the region by striking a diplomatic and security deal between them. Saudi Arabia condemned the last Israeli attack on Iran, right? Those are unprecedented events in the region. And so imagine even the Gulf countries are worried because of this particular case, and that is the warmongering policies and the people who are surrounding now Trump, and they want to go to war against Iran. Gulf states wary of return to Donald Trump's maximum pressure against Iran. Imagine that. I'm just going to a little bit make it bigger for my eyes. So Saudi Arabia and the United Arab Emirates have signaled they remain committed to de-escalation with Iran as they prepare for the return of Donald Trump. hoping he can end a year of war in the Middle East, but wary his unpredictability could inflame tensions further. Leaders like Saudi Arabia's Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman were among Trump's most enthusiastic Arab backers during his first term as US president, welcoming both his adversarial approach to Iran and his transactional style after years of Gulf frustration with American policy. But in the years since, the Gulf two powerhouses, Saudi Arabia and the UAE, have changed tack, seeking to engage with Iran amid doubts about the US's commitment to their security. This became more urgent after Hamas's October 7 attack against Israel triggered a wave of regional hostilities and heightened tensions between the US and Iran, with both Riyadh and Abu Dhabi seeking to remain on the sidelines. Diplomats and people close to regional governments say they are also wary that Trump could give Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu more license to escalate against Israel's foes and to raise tensions with Iran, risking an all-out conflict that could spill over into the Gulf states. I mean, they're correct in this. And China brokered agreement in March 2023 re-established diplomatic relations between Saudi Arabia and Iran after a 7-year rift. Gulf leaders' concern now is that an even broader conflagration in the Middle East could undermine their domestic development plans. But while vowing to bring peace to the Middle East, Trump has also expressed support for Israel's military offensives and appears set to appoint Iran hawks to his administration. For example, Elise Stefanik, she is Trump's pick for U.S. ambassador to the UN. She wrote on X that, quote, the U.S. is ready for a return to President Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. This is her only 2 days ago on her X account saying that the U.S. is ready for a return to President Trump's maximum pressure campaign against Iran. For too long, our enemies have been emboldened by the weakness of the Biden-Harris administration, and this girl is going to become the ambassador of the U.S. in the UN. Gulf leaders fear the president-elect, who implemented a string of pro-Israeli policies in his first term, could embolden Netanyahu rather than rein him in. So Biden was initially critical of Saudi Arabia and Prince Mohammed after he entered office, vowing to reassess Washington's relationship with the kingdom. But ties improved as Biden pushed for a three-way deal that would have led to the U.S. agreeing to a defense treaty with Saudi Arabia in return for the kingdom normalizing relations with Israel. Those plans were unappended by the war in Gaza. Trump, who counted the 2020 Abraham Accords normalization between Israel, the UAE, and 3 other Arab states as one of his biggest foreign policy successes, may seek his own grand bargain. But that would require both ending Israel's wars against Hamas in Gaza and Hezbollah in Lebanon and getting it to make concessions towards the establishment of a Palestinian state. Look, it's just a fantasy now to believe that Saudi Arabia or the US or any other power in the region or abroad can just force or impose the two-state solution on Israel. Israel will not accept it. Israel already declared the death of the two-state solution and made it illegal even to speak about it, right? So don't expect the US to come to make a two-state solution viable again. It's impossible to implement now after October 7. I mentioned this multiple times. It's going to be one-state solution. I'm not talking about my wishful thinking. I'm talking about my analysis. It's going to be one state. And it's going either to be Palestine, one state, everybody lives as equal citizens, Jews, Christians, and Muslims, or it's going to be one Zionist supremacist state where 2 million Palestinians from Gaza would be ethnically cleansed and then push the rest from the West Bank to Jordan and occupy entire Palestine. But remember, this solution is also not viable. Just ethnically cleansing people, killing their children, committing genocide, extermination here and there, it won't solve the security problems for Israel. It will only exacerbate the security problems. It will create a new generation that is willing to fight Israel even more, right? So if Israel wants to take that path, it's a circle of endless conflict and bloodshed in the region. If Israel thinks that they can somehow force themselves into this. Now, I would show you a video of Marco Rubio. So Marco Rubio was on Face the Nation program previously, and he was asked about Iran and what he thinks about Iran and if he wants to go to war with Iran. And this is what he has to say about Iran. Take a look.
So if you don't get a deal, what's the alternative? Do we have to go to war? Is it necessary to be absolutely certain they don't have a nuclear weapon or the capability to build one?
And I think that the best way to have achieved that is to leave in place both the unilateral sanctions and the international sanctions. You combine that with a very clear demarcation to the Iranian regime, and that is this: if you cross this threshold, you will face military action on the part of the United States. We don't want that to happen, but the risk of a nuclear Iran is so great that that option must be on the table.
So if it came to that, that would be an option that you would actually
absolutely
consider and use.
And let me tell you why. If we don't do it, someone else will. The Saudis are not going to sit there and watch Iran build a Shia bomb without a Sunni bomb. The Israelis are not going to sit there and watch a regime that calls for their destruction develop the capability to do so. But again, we would hope to have avoided that point by severely limiting and sanctioning Iran for its nuclear ambitions. And quite frankly, I think this deal could literally lead to increasing the prospects for war.
But what you're saying here, we cannot let Iran become a nuclear power, and we have to do whatever is necessary if that includes going to war.
Absolutely. By the way, if Iran doesn't need nuclear power, peaceful nuclear power, they're an oil-rich country. The only reason why they want enrichment and reprocessing capability is they want to one day be able to be nuclear threshold or nuclear possessed.
As one of our commentators says, he's laughing and says, "Lols, what? Sunni bombs?" I mean, Pakistan is a Sunni power and they have nuclear weapons. So I don't think that Saudi Arabia would like to have a nuclear weapon if Iran has a nuclear weapon. I mean, that's just a new level or another level of hasbara. The only country in the region would mind Iran having a nuclear weapon seriously and wants to go to war against Iran is Israel, right? And why Iran may want to have a nuclear weapon to begin with, that's the real question, because Israel has nuclear weapons, right? I mean, these people are so hypocritical and they don't want to tell us why probably Iran wants to have a nuclear weapon. They say they don't want to have a nuclear weapon anyways, but officially, we don't know what is being cooked under the table. But to begin with, why Iran wants to have a nuclear weapon? I would tell you why. Because the experiences of the past 80 years after World War II have shown us clearly that the United States would not hesitate to overthrow any government to steal their natural resources, and especially the energy resources, and use excessive force to achieve this foreign policy goal. And many countries around the world have faced this destiny, and their countries have been decimated, and their people were killed with hundreds of thousands because they didn't have nuclear weapons. And the countries which had nuclear weapons or have nuclear weapons, they were immune from American intervention, right? But most importantly, in the Middle East, in this particular region, why Iran would like to have a nuclear weapon? Or if you're an Iranian official, why do you want to have a nuclear weapon? Right? Because Israel has a nuclear weapon and they're threatening for expansion in the region. They're speaking about the Great Israel Project. They themselves speak about it. It's not like we're analyzing it. The Israeli officials say they are seeking for a Greater Israel Project, right? So that's why many countries who have given up their weapons of mass destruction, they faced also similar destiny, like Libya, for example. So America has basically told the world that you are not immune from my barbarism and my wars unless you have weapons of mass destruction. This is the message that America sent to the rest of the world, right? And Marco Rubio, just for those, for the folks who don't know more, if this guy becomes foreign minister or secretary of state, whatever. So John McCain's apprentice, the guy who personally helped murder Libya and pushed to arm Al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria. He called Trump, who did everything Israel told him to, anti-Israeli, and says accusations against Israel of war crimes and genocide are ridiculous. And this is Marco Rubio in Libya with these two pieces of shit, McCain and Lindsey Graham. I hope this guy is rotting in hell now, McCain and this guy, or hopefully soon. And they have destroyed Libya. They supported Al-Qaeda fanatics there, and they participated in the killing of the leader of Libya, one of the most prosperous African nations, for the sake of stopping the Libyan project for an African currency based on gold. This is why they killed him, right? So this is Marco Rubio, guys. For those who are, I mean, he's also not so smart, to be honest with you. This tweet that he made a few months ago, it's so hilarious. Like he said, China, Russia, and Iran are evading US sanctions by using alternative financial systems. So he introduced a bill which would ensure these regimes are held accountable as they attempt to bypass our laws. This is so ridiculous to the extent that I don't think that he read himself what it is posted here. And it is so ridiculous and stupid to assume that other countries will follow American sanctions to deal among each other. Like, if China, Russia, and Iran are paying to each other for transactions, for trade deals, why would they even care about American sanctions among themselves? Like, I don't really understand what's the logic behind this. There is nothing. There is like an empty, seedless brain, basically. How can anyone post anything like this and think it's a smart thing to do? Like, why would Russia, China, and Iran even deal, if they want to make trade with each other, care what the Americans say? Seriously, who they think they are? It's crazy. It's crazy how they... Oh, guys, Elise Stefanik, she's of course endorsed by none other than Rabbi Shmuley. Rabbi Shmuley. He says, congratulations to my friend, the courageous Elise Stefanik, who will follow in the great footsteps of Donald Trump, last UN ambassador, my friend, the amazing Kelly Craft, and give the dark holes of the UN hell. So if this guy endorses you, I'm not sure about your ethics, to be honest with you. Just, and it has nothing to do with his religion or anything related to his religion. His personality, he's a nut job. He's a psychopath, basically, and he supports the extermination of the Palestinians, and he plays victim every time somebody challenges him in the street. I think the least of my concerns is what he sells, because I'm told that he has a sex shop with his daughter. I don't give two Fs about that, to be honest with you. But if this guy really endorses you, there is some problems. Take a look.
What an amazing thing here at the Trump rally to have Elise Stefanik, who really is the toughest woman in all of Congress, one of the greatest friends we've ever had. And having served as rabbi at Oxford University for 11 years, I know what it's like to see the anti-Semitism of the elite universities. You manhandle the presidents of Penn, MIT, Harvard. We can't thank you enough. What's the future of what we will do about anti-Semitism on the campuses?
So these protests in the U.S. Universities were all about anti-Semitism, and she's going to come and hit with an iron fist.
So the future is electing President Donald J. Trump. We need strong moral leadership in the White House, and then we need strong moral leadership in our higher education institutions. I asked them a very direct question. Does calling for the genocide of Jews violate your university's code of conduct? And instead of answering yes, which we all know is the correct answer, they said it depends on the context. And the world heard, and within 1 week, 1 billion people knew that.
Anyways, it's a little bit noisy now. You know, you get the point, guys. She's paid hundreds of thousands of dollars from the APAC. So what do you expect her to say? And it is worse, you know, like it's really bad. It's really, really bad. This appointment is really, really bad. I mean, she's an Israel first. She's not anywhere close to America first.
As long as I serve the American people, I will defend George Washington's vision of religious pluralism and freedom. Today, this means crushing anti-Semitism at home and supplying the state of Israel with what it needs, when it needs it, without conditions to achieve total victory in the face of evil. Chants of death to America are not hollow slogans. They are a promise that what happened here on October 7th could happen in the United States unless Hamas and its jihadist accomplices are eliminated. And it is the United States' high honor and high responsibility to support Israel's effort. I have been clear at home, and I will be clear here. There is no excuse for an American president to block aid to Israel, aid that was duly passed by the Congress. There is no excuse to ease sanctions on Iran, paying a $6 billion ransom to the world's leading state sponsor of terror, or to dither and hide while our friends fight for their lives. No excuse, full stop. That's why I'm proud to have sponsored or backed every measure to aid Israel that has come before the United States Congress. Every single one. And it's
So I'm really curious. You know, I have people who are pro Trump and they follow. And I'm really you know me, I don't want to cause any inconveniences for you or for anyone else. Like if you're a pro-Trump, when you see these videos and when you see these personalities coming to the Trump administration, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like these people are going to serve American interests? It's really, and she's a nut job too. I mean, she posted something like this in 2022. She says, "America first, China last." Like these people are crazy. Like, and Chen Weiha, he says, first in what? COVID infections and deaths, gun violence, prison population, number of homeless people, bombs dropped in foreign countries, national debt of $30 trillion, number of idiot politicians like you. Seriously, where do they find these people? Where do they find them? So we moved from the Middle East, Iran, Israel, and now China. And President Trump, unfortunately, he's going to appoint John Bolton 2.0. Trump picks anti-China warhawk Mike Waltz as National Security Advisor. Waltz, he is the John Bolton 2.0, obsessively paints China as an existential threat to the US by repeating WMD-style lies, while promoting armed separatism on China's island province of Taiwan, including proposing openly declaring Taiwan independent of China in violation of international law and Washington's on bilateral agreements with China itself. By appointing a national security advisor eagerly provoking war with China inside its own borders, the premise that Trump was a peace candidate has fully evaporated. Trump only ever planned on leaving Ukraine to start what the neocons see as the more important war with China, a pivot a historical Harris administration would have also made. What Trump supporters will do now is either summon their integrity and admit they were betrayed, or they will make excuses, including repeating neocon lies about China. And the same goes with Iran, and the same goes probably later with Russia. We don't know much, but I also said that the neocons in the US, they want to freeze the war in Ukraine to focus on Iran. Now, Brian Balvetic, I don't want to butcher his surname, Balterik or Balvetic, Brian is an amazing geopolitical analyst. He thinks similarly, like me, myself, but he thinks that they want to focus on China. I believe that the bus has already left the station for China. It's impossible for them to wage any type of war against China. It's done. And nothing can stop the Chinese economic growth. Now, it's done. But for Iran, in the US, they think, or they're delusional enough to think that they could harm Iran to the extent that Iran's regime could be crumbled and a regime change war could happen in Iran to install a pro-US and pro-Israel regime there by the Riza Pahlavi and these monarchists, right? This is what, shit, the water almost dropped on my laptop here. That would have been not so fun. Anyways, it's safe now. The same national security advisor, because now we spoke about China, right? He also has some statements against Russia. And so Mike Waltz is boasting about Trump's threatening Putin to take the tops off the Kremlin. So this is the cringe things that you see from these new appointees, that they all think they're some sort of Rambos, and they are just scaring the rest of the world, you know, like we're so scared of them now. And that Trump is so good because he scares Putin, he scares Xi Jinping, and scares Iran. Like they really think that the entire world is intimidated by them. You know, this is how they see the world, because they live in their own bubbles. They only speak to their own people. And with their own people, I mean the people around them, the bureaucrats, the lobbyists, the bankers, the people who have invested interest in going to wars. This is the people who they speak to. They don't have broader vision of the world, where the world is headed to, what happened in BRICS, what's happening in the Middle East. They are still living in a bubble, and that's very counterproductive for them. And Waltz, again, he says, Donald Trump is the best president for Israel. And so imagine, like, if this guy becomes the... this guy is going to become the national security advisor, right? So as you see, this was on the Republican Jewish coalition. He says, Donald Trump is the best president for Israel. So we have to brace ourselves and see what's going to happen next. And I think that it's not going to be really well.
President Trump has been the best president for Israel and for the Middle East in our lifetime. ISIS defeated, Soleimani dead.
Look how he combined between ISIS was defeated and Soleimani is dead. ISIS was not defeated by the US, guys. If there is any one of you from the US who thinks that the US destroyed ISIS, I'm sorry to say, but this is a la-la land. The people who defeated ISIS are the locals, are the people on the ground. The people who defeated ISIS are the Syrian army, are the Russian forces, are Hezbollah, are the Iranian advisors, one of which was Soleimani, who Trump killed. The United States carpet bombed Raqqa, which was the headquarters of ISIS, carpet bombed it, like turned it into ashes. That's not a victory. That's not how wars are fought. That's the same way that now Israel is fighting against Hamas in Gaza. That's not a war. Just carpet bombing and entirely eliminating neighborhoods. This is not a war. And then allowing them and opening some corridors for them to escape to the deserts near the Syrian army positions. We all know these games, and we know who created ISIS to begin with. Trump himself said that Obama and Clinton created ISIS. And believe me, he is correct. He's correct. And it is the US deep state which created ISIS in Syria. And Trump came at a time when the regime change war, which was hoped to remove Assad from power by ISIS and Al-Qaeda affiliates in Syria, when he came in 2017 to power, or 2016, the balance of power has shifted dramatically on the side of Assad, thanks to the intervention of the Russian Air Force and the Iranian advisors and Hezbollah fighters, right? So when he came to power, the regime change war that the deep state in the US initiated in Syria has already failed. So when he made the decision to stop the regime change war, that's only when they went against ISIS and bombed them. Before that, ISIS was just running around and fighting against the Syrian army positions. But Trump took the decision to eliminate ISIS because it has become a burden, because the policy has failed. So on the chessboard, you have this tool that was hoped to achieve some goals, and when they failed, you remove this from the chessboard, right? So don't give so much credit to the US in defeating ISIS. They didn't. So this is the situation now with Syria. We're hearing some talks, for example, by the Vice President-elect J.D. Vance. He says Trump will not hire neocons who refuse to enforce Trump's troop withdrawal from Syria. And there is talk that he could withdraw from Syria. And this is why Erdogan's wet dreams have been revived, because now Erdogan thinks that once the Americans withdraw, then he will occupy these territories in Syria. J.D. Vance was on Tucker Carlson's show, and he said that Trump will not appoint these personalities because, but as I mentioned to you, he replaced these Pompeo and Nikki Haley personalities with worse people who are worse. So let's see. RFK said something important here. He said, when I was on the plane the other day with President Trump, he took a piece of paper and drew a map of the Middle East with all the nations on it. Then he wrote in each country the troop strength. He was looking at the border between Syria and Turkey and asking questions about the men to his generals. Tucker asked him, wait, you're saying that Trump drew an accurate map of the Middle East with troop strength? RFK says yes. So he wants basically to withdraw from Syria. Also, RFK is mentioning this. But my suspicion is, I will show you the map of control on Syria. My suspicion is that if he withdraws from Syria, he will hand over the territories to, especially the 30 Look, this is the map of control over Syria, right? Red is the Syrian army. The yellow is the American occupation forces here. And this green is also American occupation forces. So if the US will withdraw from this yellow, and this gray area is occupied by Turkey, and these green areas are occupied by Turkey and Al-Qaeda forces. Turkey wants to expand this to here and expand it to here. Like they want to seal the borders between Syria and Turkey and send the Syrian refugees back to these areas. I'm not sure that the Syrian side would play with Turkey this game. I don't think they will play this game with Turkey. Syrian side insists that if Turkey cooperates with them and commits and sends a formal commitment to Iraq and Russia, the mediators, that Erdogan will withdraw his forces from Syria, then the Syrian army will advance to these areas and seal the borders and secure the borders between Syria and Turkey. So if the concern of Turkey is the Kurdish militias, Syria already told them that they will come and occupy the border crossings and push the Kurdish militias away from it. So Erdogan has no excuse at all to occupy any territories in the presence of the Syrian army forces, because the Syrian army can't do that unless he wants to come and occupy these territories for his own colonial reasons. And speaking of Syria, we have some screenshots from articles. For example, Congresswoman Stefanik, she pushed back on Trump's Syria decision. So J.D. Vance said that he will not appoint people who lobbied and pressured and went against his decision to withdraw troops from Syria, but she became the U.S. ambassador to the UN, and she was against Trump's decision to withdraw from Syria in 2016 and 17. Rubio, this guy who is going to become the Secretary of Defense, he introduced legislation to further isolate Assad regime, extend the Caesar Act, which is basically an starvation act of the Syrian people. So those are the people. If you support Trump, please prove me wrong, right? Those are the people in the Trump administration. I don't know if you watched the video of Assad's speech. There was a conference in Riyadh for the Arabic and Islamic countries, and they met there. And Assad held a speech, 5-minute speech, which I subtitled it to English. Let me show you this speech and let me know your opinions. Type your opinion in the live chat. And let me know if any other Arab leader dares to speak like this against Israel and the US. Take a look.
سمو الأمير محمد بن سلمان ولي عهد المملكة العربية السعودية، أصحاب السيادة والجلالة والسمو. لن أتحدث عن حقوق الفلسطينيين التاريخية الثابتة وحتمية التمسك بها، أو عن صمود الشعبين اللبناني والفلسطيني وواجبنا في دعمهما العاجل والفوري، ولا عن شرعية المقاومة في كلا البلدين وما جسدته من شرف وكرامة ورقي، وما قدمته من أيقونات بقادتها الشرفاء ومقاتليها الشجعان. لن أتحدث عن نازية المحتلين الصهاينة وجرائمهم وكيانهم المصطنع، ولا عن تحول الغرب من داعم لهذا الكيان وجرائمه منذ قيامه إلى شريك مباشر ومعلن فيها، فهذا لن يضيف شيئا لما يعرفه غالبية العرب والمسلمين وما يعرفه كثيرون غيرهم في العالم اليوم. أما عن قمتنا فمنذ عام مضى التقينا وعبرنا، أدنا واستنكرنا، ومنذ عام والجريمة مستمرة. فهل نلتقي اليوم لكي نستنسخ الماضي الراحل وأحداثه، أم لنبدل في مسار المستقبل القادم وآفاقه؟ ففي العام الماضي أكدنا على وقف العدوان وحماية الفلسطينيين، وكانت محصلة السنة عشرات الآلاف من الشهداء وملايين المهجرين في فلسطين وفي لبنان. وفي العام 2002 طرح العرب مبادرة للسلام، فكان الرد المزيد من المجازر بحق الفلسطينيين. وفي العام 91 قررنا عربيا الدخول في لعبة النيات الحسنة الأمريكية عبر المشاركة في عملية السلام في مدريد، فكان سلامنا حافزا لحروبهم وتشريعا لاستيطانهم. وهذا لا يدل على خطأ في التوجهات، وإنما على قصور في تحضير الأدوات. فأداتنا هي اللغة وأداتهم هي القتل. نحن نقول وهم يفعلون، نقدم السلام فنحصد الدماء. بقاء النتائج على حالها يستدعي إبقاء الأدوات المستخدمة ذاتها. أما تغيير تلك النتائج وهو ما نسعى إليه جميعا، فيتطلب استبدال الوسائل والآليات القائمة المجربة مرارا وغير المجدية تكرارا. فإذا كنا متفقين حول المبادئ المطروحة، فكيف نحولها إلى تطبيق على الواقع بتحديد أهدافها والنتائج التي نرمي إليها، بتحديد أدواتها المتوفرة من أجل تحقيقها، بتحديد الجهة المستهدفة منها، والذي من شأنه تحويلها من نيات إلى أفعال، ومن خطة إلى إنجاز، ومن بيان إلى واقع. وقد تبدو الأهداف من البدائه بالنسبة لأي منا عند ذكر الحقوق المستباحة للشعب الفلسطيني، لكن ما قيمة هذه الحقوق بمجملها عندما لا يمتلك الفلسطينيون أساسها وهو حق الحياة؟ ما قيمة أي حق يعطى في أي مكان من العالم في أي مجال من المجالات للأموات؟ هذا يعني أنه مع أهمية العمل من أجل استعادة الحقوق الشرعية كافة، فالأولوية حالياً هي لإيقاف المجازر، هي لإيقاف الإبادة، هي لإيقاف التطهير العرقي. أما الأدوات فباعتقادي أننا نمتلكها مجتمعين، شعبياً ورسمياً، عرباً ومسلمين، دولاً وشعوباً. وما نحتاجه هو القرار باستخدامها في حال رفض الكيان للتجاوب مع ما ورد في البيان واتفق عليه وهو المتوقع، وتحديد خياراتنا حينها. هل نغضب مرة أخرى؟ هل ندين؟ هل نناشد المجتمع الدولي؟ أم نقاطع وهو أضعف الإيمان؟ أم ماذا؟ ما هي خطتنا التنفيذية؟ من دون ذلك فنحن نحض على استمرار الإبادة لنصبح شركاء غير مباشرين فيها، فنحن لا نتعامل مع دولة بالمعنى القانوني، وإنما مع كيان استعماري خارج عن القانون. نحن لا نتعامل مع شعب بالمعنى الحضاري، وإنما مع قطعان من المستوطنين أقرب إلى الهمجية منهم إلى الإنسانية. ومن غير الصحيح القول أن المشكلة هي في حكومة راهنة متطرفة فاقدة للعقل وشعب مذعور مما حصل في 7 تشرين الأول في العام الماضي. كلهم يعملون بعقل إيديولوجي واحد، عقل مريض بسفك الدماء، مريض بوهم التفوق، مصاب بانفصام الشخصية بين كره النازية ظاهريا وعشقها كجزء عضوي منه واقعيا. أولئك هم المستهدفون من لقائنا اليوم، وأولئك هم المشكلة، والمشكلة تحدد الوسيلة، والوسيلة أساس النجاح. وهنا يكمن جوهر اجتماعنا اليوم الذي أرجو له أن يكون ناجحا، وأن نوفق في اتخاذ القرارات الصائبة كي لا نكون كمن يتحدث مع اللص بلغة القانون، ومع المجرم بلغة الأخلاق، ومع السفاح بلغة الإنسانية، وكي لا تكون النيات الحسنة مرة أخرى منطلقا وحافزا للمزيد من الموت بحق الشعبين الفلسطيني واللبناني اللذين دفعا على مر العقود ثمن النيات الطيبة والآليات الغائبة. والسلام عليكم.
So if you read between the lines, there are a few things here in this speech. The first one is all these reports, allegations, and rumors by Saudi-funded, Emirati-funded, Israeli-funded, American-funded TV outlets in the region, media outlets, influencers, talking heads, who have been telling us in the past weeks that Assad abandoned his allies in Iran, abandoned his ally Hezbollah, and now they are making a U-turn in order to save his, his throne, basically. And because he's afraid that the Israelis and the Americans are coming to replace him and kill him. I mean, since 2011, Assad survived on multiple occasions death, right? They were able to at multiple times to come and kill Assad, and he came under immense threat. So he saw what happened to Gaddafi, and he rejected the American-led regime change wars in the region, and also the supremacy of Israel in the region. And he could have been killed in this discourse. So I don't think that he is afraid of death now after 14 years of war, and I don't think his priority is his throne. Although he knows quite well that if he is, God forbid, assassinated or killed, more chaos could, unfortunately, hit Syria. But that's not a reason for him to do any type of U-turns. I told you multiple times, I made videos about it, that Assad is not a personality that betrays his allies and does 180-degree U-turns in one day or another. And I tried to explain that even in the logic of interests, Syria's interest is for having strategic relationship with Iran and also supporting Hezbollah in Lebanon, also for its own sake, right? So this is also another proof that all these reports and allegations were fake news, because he is the only Arab leader in this meeting who praised the armed resistance against or armed struggle of the Palestinians and the Lebanese against Israel, and called Israel an illegitimate entity, basically. No other Arab or Islamic leader said that. So just for the Fatima who says blah, 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 all talks but no bite, I think that this cannot be said to Assad, at least, because his country is under constant attack by Israel for doing things that could bite Israel, right? for sending weapons to Hezbollah, for training Hezbollah, for giving logistical support, medical support, military support to Hezbollah. So I think that he does more than blah blah, and because he does more than blah blah, then Syria is the only, or Assad is the only Arab leader who comes under almost daily attacks by Israel. So if he was only blah blah, I don't think that Israel would have just bombed his country. And the second thing, he proposed something that we can execute our policies. Our priorities is to stop the massacres, he said. How are we going to do that? The least thing we can do, he said, is boycott Israel. This is his approach, right? And this is a message to the Emiratis. This is a message to Turkey. This is a message to Azerbaijan. Turkey does business with Israel. Azerbaijan does business with Israel. The UAE does business with Israel. Egypt does business with Israel. Many Arabic countries, Jordan does business with Israel. So he was like, maybe you should guys start with boycotting Israel, like in the trade, for example, relationships. So he gave them something to think about, but in the final statement of this conference, of this meeting, they didn't mention anything about boycott or anything else. So I think that's the situation in the Arab world for a long time. Kevork should be in the topmost invites to media. Thank you so much, my friend. I am humbled and appreciate your comment. And I wish that I could go one day on Judge Napolitano's show, especially now in the context of a new administration of Donald Trump. That I would like to explain to the American people what Obama, then Trump, then Biden did to Syria, and what should really be the foreign policy of the current administration, which I'm not really hopeful of, but still I want to communicate with the people. I'm not interested in the politicians because the politicians have interests and they are committed to their funders. But I can build bridges with the people, with the Americans, those who are watching Judge Napolitano or any other YouTube channels who have big following. I would love to go to their channels. So if you know any of them who are interested in listening to a Syrian perspective, send them messages or write in the comments. I don't know. Like sometimes I myself send emails, but I don't have any email for Judge Napolitano to send him. And rest assured, there are multiple guests go to Judge Napolitano, but they don't give me the contact, so I can't really ask them further. It's a very exclusive club. It seems sometimes people want to keep the contacts for themselves. Anyways, I've been your host, Kevork Almassian of Syriana Analysis. Thank you so much, guys, for tuning into today's live streaming. 40% of the viewers of Syriana Analysis are not subscribed. It was 60%, now it's 40%, which is amazing. But if you're watching this stream, and please check if you're subscribed. That would be amazing. And hit the like button. And if you like to support my independent work, you can become a patron. The link is scrolling on the screen, patreon.com/Syriana Analysis. And I will see you tomorrow. It's Wednesday, 5 p.m. Central European Time, 11 a.m. Eastern American Time. Peace be upon you and upon your families. Salam.